Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 9, Brahma's Prayers for Creative Energy, Text 26. Maitreya Uvacha
Maitreya Uvacha.
Swa
Swa
Sambhavam
Sambhavam
Nishamyaivam
Samyaiva
Tapo
Tapo
Vidya
Vidya
Samadhibhi
Samadhi
Yavan
Yavan
Mano
Mano
Vacha
Vacha
Stutva
Vacha
Virarama
Virarama
Sa Kinavat
Kinavat
Maitreya Uvacha
Maitreya Uvacha
Swasambhavam Nishamyaivam
Vasambhavam Nishamyaivam
Tapo Vidya Samadhibhi
Tapo Vidya Samadhi
Yavan Mano Vachastutva
Yavan Mano Vachastuva
Virarama Sakinavat
Virarama Sakinavat
Maitreya Uvacha
Maitreya Uvacha
Swasambhavam Nishamyaivam
Vasambhavam Nishamyaivam
Tapo Vidya Samadhibhi
Tapo Vidya Samadhi
Yavan Mano Vachastutva
Yavan Mano Vachastuva
Virarama Sakinavat
Virarama Sakinavat
Maitreya Uvacha
Maitreya Uvacha
Swasambhavam Nishamyaivam
Vasambhavam Nishamyaivam
Tapo Vidya Samadhibhi
Tapo Vidya Samadhi
Yavan Mano Vachastutva
Yavan Mano Vachastuva
Virarama Sakinavat
Virarama Sakinavat
Maitreya Uvacha
Maitreya Uvacha
Swasambhavam Nishamyaivam
Vasambhavam Nishamyaivam
Tapo Vidya Samadhi
Tapo Vidya Samadhi
Yavan Mano Vachastutva
Yavan Mano Vachastuva
Virarama Sakinava
Virarama Sakhinava Maitreya Uvacha Maitreya Uvacha Svasambhavam Nishamyaivam Svasambhavam Nishamyaivam Tapo Vidya Samadhi Tapo Vidya Samadhi Yavan Mano Vachastutva Yavan Mano Vachastutva Virarama Sakhinava Virarama Sakhinava Maitreya Uvacha Maitreya Uvacha Svasambhavam Nishamyaivam Svasambhavam Nishamyaivam Tapo Vidya Samadhi Tapo Vidya Samadhi Yavan Mano Vachastutva Virarama Sakhinava Virarama Sakhinava.
Mataji? Okay. Maitreya Uvacha.
Maitreya Uvacha.
The great sage Maitreya said,
The great sage Maitreya said,
Swasambhavam,
Vasambhavam,
the source of his appearance,
the source of his appearance,
Nishamya,
Nishamya,
by seeing,
by seeing,
Evam,
Evam,
thus,
thus,
tapa,
Tapa,
penance,
penance,
vidya,
vidya,
knowledge,
knowledge,
samadhi,
samadhi,
as also by concentration of the mind,
as also by concentration of the mind.
yavat,
Yavat,
as far as possible,
as far as possible.
mana,
Mana,
mind,
mind,
vacha,
vacha,
words,
words,
stutva,
Sudva,
having prayed,
having prayed,
virarama,
Vidarama,
became silent,
became silent.
sa,
Sa,
he,
he,
Brahma,
Brahma,
kinavat,
Vinavat,
as if tired.
as if tired.
Translation. The sage Maitreya said, O Vidura, after observing the source of his appearance, namely the personality of Godhead, Brahma prayed for his mercy as far as his mind and words would permit him. Thus having prayed, he became silent, as if tired from his activities of penance, knowledge, and mental concentration. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. Brahma's enlightenment in knowledge was due to the Lord sitting within his heart. After being created, Brahma could not ascertain the source of his appearance. But after penance and mental concentration, he could see the source of his birth, and thus he became enlightened through his heart. The spiritual master outside and the spiritual master within are both representations of the Lord. Unless one has contact with such bona fide representations, one cannot claim to be a spiritual master. Lord Brahma had no opportunity to take the help of a spiritual master from outside, because at that time Brahma himself was the only creature in the universe. Therefore, on becoming satisfied by the prayers of Brahma, the Lord enlightened him about everything from within. Okay, so we'll read the verse again. Maitreya Ruvacha swasambhavam nisham yaivam tabo vidya samadhibi yavan mano vachastutva virarama sakinavat. The sage Maitreya said, O Vidura, after observing the source of his appearance, namely the personality of Godhead, Brahma prayed for his mercy as far as his mind and words would permit him. Thus, having prayed, he became silent, as if tired from his activities of penance, knowledge, and mental concentration. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharane Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastitya Dejatarne Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasani Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare 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 Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakapatarubhyascha kripa sindhubhya evacha patidanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. So this is Maitreya speaking. Lord Brahma has been, up to the previous verse, Lord Brahma has been reciting his quite extensive prayers to the Supreme Personality of Godhead right at the beginning of creation, when Lord Brahma had initially appeared on the lotus flower, top of the lotus flower, and he appeared there on his own and became confused, bewildered, he was not able to understand at all what is the situation. Who am I? Where am I? How have I got here? Who is behind it all? What am I meant to do about it all? Just nothing at all. Yes, he was really just in a very extreme situation indeed. And no one to refer to, no one to ask. And so, seeing he found himself initially in that position, condition, then he prayed. Well, as mentioned here, he performed penance. He performed penance, and he prayed for knowledge, and he did all these things with great concentration. He was really focused. He was not suffering. Anyway, he gave it his full attention, and his mind was not wandering off and considering any other things, which is the tendency of the conditioned souls within this material world. That they are confronted by very extraordinary situations from time to time, which they really just can't deal with. But so when that happens, they become focused, but then after a little while they lose the focus, and their minds just drift back off into material existence, just contemplating this and that, and it's like that. Even sometimes it's like that for devotees. Sometimes we have some very challenging service. I remember when we'd go out on Sankirtan, either distributing books or trying to raise funds, and there's a certain amount of pressure that we should do our best, and there's a certain amount of pressure even in the sense of a little competition. Who is going to do the best? And so there's that, these are like impetuses for focusing. So like this, the devotees may focus quite intensely on what they're doing. But then, if it goes well, it can happen in different ways under different circumstances, but I've seen that when it goes well, then you feel, okay, I'm not going to be embarrassed. I'm going to do okay. So they're not going to look at me and think, what were you doing out there? You were wasting your time. They're going to think, okay, he did good. He did okay. So that pressure eases off, and then one may complete the task, and then there's no pressure because you've completed that somewhat demanding task. But then the mind may, what to speak of not feeling pressured, the mind may start to gravitate towards something material. This is what happens. Therefore, in a certain context, in a certain sense, to have at least some pressure as opposed to no pressure at all, to have some pressure, it can be helpful in Krishna consciousness. In fact, usually it is, or often, or usually. And therefore we find Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati, one thing he said was that it is good if the temple is always a little bit in debt. Not too much, so it's just, it can even become hopeless. Not too much, but just some, so the devotees feel that there's some urgency about going out and preaching and meeting people and trying to deal with the situation. And that helps. That actually helps. So Lord Brahma, he was there and he felt great pressure. And he really didn't know what to do, and it's been described for the last so many verses, and even in the previous chapter there's description, and a lot of it is very nice, like the description of when he initially sat down, performed penance, and focused his mind and prayed intensely and chanted something. Then the Lord appeared before him. Yes, the Lord appeared before him, or even within him, or before him. The Lord appeared with his abode, and everything was just most wonderful from our point of view, according to our experience, inconceivably wonderful. Just truly extra-dimensional experience. And then Lord Brahma, feeling so deeply, not just impressed, but deeply moved by this whole experience, then he offered the prayers, which these quite extensive prayers. And sometimes when I read these types of prayers, of which there are quite a number in Srimad Bhagavatam, these devotees have seen the Lord. The Lord has appeared to them, or maybe not even, but in many cases appeared to them and they pray. Or in some cases, like Vritrasura in the 6th canto, offers just very amazing prayers. But the Lord has not appeared in front of him, but he's offering prayers. And one thing I think, sometimes when I read these prayers, and actually this morning as I was just glancing through some of these prayers in this chapter, I was thinking, if the Lord appeared before us, what would we do? Or pray, if we say pray, what would we pray? Of course, one could always sort of default back to some prayers by some great devotee, maybe chant Brahma Samhita or something like that, which is just wonderful. There's nothing wrong with that. But if the idea was that you or we were meant to now compose and offer prayers, what would we do? How long would we last before we ran out of prayers? Or even sometimes I ask the devotees, it's a somewhat different thing. I ask the devotees, how many pastimes of the Lord do you know? Give a list. And how many could you recite? And in what detail could you recite them? Anyway, maybe that's by the way, but here is Lord Brahma, and he has prayed. As the verse says, what did the verse say? Brahma prayed for the Lord's mercy as far as his mind and words would permit him. Yes, he just gave his best. And then he became silent, as if apparently tired, fatigued from that effort of focusing the mind and also performing some penance. He just sat there for a long time. If I remember correctly, 100 years of the demigods or something like that. Really long time. He sat there, cross-legged. And all these things were going on. So Lord Brahma is a very important example who is described, this whole experience of his is described in a few places in the Bhagavatam, at least in a couple of places, which means it's very important. If something is repeated in Srimad Bhagavatam, it means it's very important. So Lord Brahma then, the Lord acted as his spiritual master and didn't even just act as, but the Lord actually became his spiritual master and just gave him all necessary instruction for his Krishna consciousness. Therefore our parampara, our disciplic succession, we're in the Brahma Sampradaya, Brahma Madhva Gaudiya, but Brahma initially. And before Brahma, who was his spiritual master? It's the Lord. It's the Lord. So Srila Prabhupada looks at it in interesting ways. Lord Brahma became enlightened through his heart. All these things were manifesting through his heart. Realization of the abode of the Lord through his heart. On a certain level, a very elevated level, there's no difference between within and without. One remembers the Lord within, and on a higher level, one may then see the Lord without. There's a famous story, if you ever make it to Badrinath in Vraj Mandala, Vrindavan. There was a devotee named Ribu Muni. Ribu. If you ever go to Russia and tell the story, the devotees will laugh because Ribu means fish in Russian. Actually Riba, but it conjugates to become Ribu in the, what would you call it? Anyway, it conjugates to become Ribu. But Ribu Muni. So there he was, meditating on the Lord within. And every day he'd just sit down and just go into this meditation on the Lord within, and he'd see Krishna, Lord Krishna with Srimati Radharani within, and it was just wonderful. But one day he sat down to do his meditation, and he couldn't see Radha and Krishna. And he was sort of straining a little bit somehow to have that type of realization as was every day, but it wasn't coming. And then he opened his eyes, and what did he see? Radha and Krishna were just standing there in front of him. So Lord Brahma, this was all going on within his mind or internally, and realization, the Lord was revealing things through the heart. Sometimes we talk about God realization, to realize the Lord, to realize Krishna, but it's arguably not exactly the right way to see it or to put it, because Krishna, Prabhupada mentions elsewhere, Krishna is always and only self-manifest. Krishna you can never make Krishna manifest. If you try to make Krishna manifest, if he's not pleased, he won't. And if he does, it's not just because you made him manifest, but because he agreed. Not just agreed, but he actually manifested himself. Krishna is always self-manifest. So therefore God realization, it's more like God revelation than realization, because realization implies that it's our action and it comes because of our action. but the Lord reveals himself. So the Lord chose to reveal himself to Lord Brahma within the heart. But here, Srila Prabhupada makes an interesting point. It's an interesting point. The spiritual master outside and the spiritual master within are both representations of the Lord. Unless one has contact with such bona fide representations, one cannot claim to be a spiritual master. One also cannot exactly claim to be a disciple. As I was reading through this the first time this morning, and I read, unless one has contact with such bona fide representations, one cannot claim, then I was expecting it to say something like, to be a devotee or to be a disciple, but one cannot claim to be a spiritual master. Of course, one cannot claim to be a spiritual master unless one was already before a devotee or a disciple. But Prabhupada's putting it in that way. One cannot claim to be a spiritual master. But then Srila Prabhupada is sort of taking the point a little further, that Lord Brahma had no opportunity to take the help of a spiritual master from outside, because he was the only one around. There was no one else. So he could only take shelter of the Lord within. Yeah. Otherwise, in general terms, as Prabhupada says, unless one has contact with the bona fide disciplic succession and the representatives of that, but also has made enough progress and is serious enough and focused enough and really has gone deeply enough into the practice of Krishna consciousness and has then started to get more direction from the Lord within, then as Prabhupada says, you can't claim to be a spiritual master. Definitely, can't claim to be a spiritual master. But Lord Brahma, he definitely became a spiritual master. Actually, eventually the Lord, as described in the second canto, if I remember correctly, the second canto, it's stated there that when Lord Brahma had doing this very intense, concentrated process of trying to go within and realize the reality, when he actually became advanced enough in that, then the Lord walked up to him, not just internally, but externally, so to speak. The Lord walked up to him and shook his hand. Yes, and congratulated him. Yes, and then spoke to him directly, face to face, giving him the Chatushloki Bhagavatam. So, in the matter of becoming a spiritual master, which is an extension of becoming a devotee, or like a deepening of becoming a devotee, becoming a disciple, then certainly the spiritual master outside has to be there, generally meaning the jiva soul devotee who is the bona fide representative of the disciplic succession externally. But then there also has to be sufficient connection with the Lord within, so that one gets instructions, gets enlightened by the Lord from within in real and substantial ways. You know, there's a lot of talk if you go into this sort of quote unquote spiritual circles. There's a lot of talk about getting enlightenment from within. There's a lot. In fact, some famous but not really bona fide sources, they reject the idea of taking knowledge, for example, from literature, even from another person, and they just say, yes, you should just, whatever comes from within. Unfortunately, sometimes if one is not on a sufficiently progressed level of Krishna consciousness, then what may come from within, it may be something else. Not just maybe, but it's extremely likely to be something else. And I've told the story before, slightly X-rated. Some of you may remember many years ago, it was in the 70s, sort of mid-70s or thereabouts, when I was living in Bhaktivedanta Manor in England. One day in the Bhagavatam class, there was one just young boy, we'd never seen him before, but somehow he came and he was there. Class finished. We got up and, you've got to put away a few things. It takes a few minutes for everyone to exit from the temple room. This boy went into, it's like a closet on the side for a minute and then came out. Would you believe? Fasten your seatbelts. Completely naked. Haribol. Except he had a rose in his hand. And he just came walking out like, life is normal, everything's going on, life's going on, and came up towards the altar holding this rose before the devotees realized, what's going on, and intervened. And so he was asked, why are you doing this? In this way, at least. And he told us that, God told me that I should come before him just as I am and offer a rose. Anyway, that's, that happened. And you get all sorts of things like this going on. People saying that they got all sorts of directions from the Lord. Maybe you remember some years ago, I won't mention the lady's name, she's still here. She appeared like around this time, around 8:30 in the morning. She just drove in from home with a watermelon. Do you remember that? And she said, I had a dream. Krishna told me that if I don't offer him a watermelon before 9 o'clock this morning, I have to divorce my husband. Seriously. You remember that? Yeah. Some years ago, an extremely nice devotee, not just some sort of crazy person. So getting direction from the Lord, from within, not that it doesn't happen, but one has to be careful because it's just, anyway, some problems can arise. If one depends on one's level of purification and advancement in Krishna consciousness. But certainly if someone is not Krishna conscious at all, certainly that, and even if someone is a bit Krishna conscious but not that Krishna conscious, then what comes from within may not be from the Lord. It may be just the mind. The mind. Yeah. That very talkative thing, full of all sorts of ideas, almost indefatigable, just endlessly surcharged with energy. The mind. So therefore, particularly if one is not advanced and some sort of idea appears within the mind in Krishna consciousness, then what is recommended, not just recommended, but we really need to get it confirmed, because sometimes it can happen. The Lord, if you read some literatures like Bhakti Ratnakara particular, which is, it's well known And it's not perhaps on the level of the writings of the six Goswamis and people like that, but still, Prabhupada refers to it in Chaitanya Charitamrita on numerous occasions about historical or geographical things. There are all sorts of stories there of devotees having dreams and getting inspirations which were actually from the Lord, in fact. So therefore, I would say on our levels, some things, inspirations may come through the heart from time to time. We should get them confirmed. Unless they're obviously Krishna conscious, but even then, always best to get these things confirmed. So, an interesting related point is that when it comes to getting knowledge, then in Bhagavad Gita in the 4th chapter, Lord Krishna makes it clear what is the basic method, the basic way devotees get knowledge. Evam parampara praptam imam rajashayo vidu. This knowledge was handed down. Krishna gave it to Vivasvan, then it was handed down through the line of saintly kings. Evam parampara praptam imam rajashayo vidu. So, yes, this is the way one gets knowledge, through disciplic succession. And as Lord Krishna says in the later on in the 4th chapter, Tadvadi pranipatena pariprashnena sevaya upadekshyanti te jnanam jnaninas tattvadarshana. If you want to understand the truth, if you want to, you should approach a spiritual master. Inquire submissively, render service. The self-realized souls can impart knowledge to you because they've seen the truth. So this is the basic way. In Bhagavad Gita, Krishna does not so much say that if you want knowledge, close your eyes, go within and see what comes. He doesn't really say that. He does say that in the 10th chapter, in a certain context. Krishna says, Tesham sadati yuktanam bhajatam pritipurvikam dadami buddhi yogam tam yena mam upayanti te. That to those who are constantly devoted to serving me with love, I give the intelligence by which they can come to me. In other words, there Krishna is saying, someone who's really very, very serious, then the Lord may give instruction. And that's chapter 10, verse 10. Then chapter 10, verse 11, he says, what does he say? Tell me. Tesham evanu kampatam aham jnana jam tamaha nashayam yatma bhavasto jnana deepena basvata. That out of compassion for them, I, dwelling within their hearts, destroy with the shining lamp of knowledge the darkness born of ignorance. Ajnana. Yeah. Jnana deep, the light of knowledge. So Srila Prabhupada, it's very important actually how Prabhupada comments on these two verses. Prabhupada comments that actually, like in effect, actually the normal way you get knowledge is from the spiritual master, or say from the devotees who are representing the spiritual master, through personal interaction. This is normally the way you get knowledge. But Srila Prabhupada then goes on to make the point that if somehow a person is not able to do that, for, there are different possible reasons why one might not be able to do that. One might be geographically isolated, or even one might be illiterate and not able to read the books, or there are different possibilities. But Prabhupada makes the point that if somehow or other the devotee is not able to take advantage, in a nice sense, of the spiritual master and the usual resources, then Krishna within the heart will help the devotee. Yes, but otherwise, normally, knowledge comes from the spiritual master, from the representatives of the spiritual master, from the devotees, the literatures. This is how knowledge comes. And therefore Prabhupada says there that, therefore, a sincere devotee will never be lacking in knowledge, one way or the other. And just an interesting little practical point. I remember we back in the old days, when I was just a young devotee in London, and we'd go out every day distributing books. And sometimes you go out and you'd be assigned a place, so you go to a place and you get there and you wouldn't be able to distribute books there. More often than not, you'd walk out of the underground railway station and there would be a policeman standing right there. And because we're dressed as devotees and we had this big book bag over our shoulders, he would immediately know what's going on, and just you wouldn't be able to do it. So then we'd have to go somewhere else, but where? So usually what we try to do, we try to find, because this is before the age of cell phones. Believe it or not, there was life before cell phones. So we couldn't just pull out the phone and just call him up, and wherever he was, he would answer. We had to find a public telephone, and if we had any money, other than our tube fare, we could try to call the temple. But the book distribution Sankirtan leader, being a good leader, would already be out, and so you wouldn't be able to get hold of him and get some advice, well, nobody went to this place, or you could try that place. So what to do? And we discussed this quite deeply on a number of occasions. Then you have no choice but to pray to Krishna and think and focus and pray. Please give me some inspiration where I can go. And do what is being described here, even in our quite neophyte condition. And so then, we would, some inspiration would come, and off we'd go to that place, and usually it'd work out. Sometimes it wouldn't too, but yes, depends how good the connection is. You know the famous story? The devotee went to visit the Pope. It's just a joke, actually. The devotee went to visit the Pope, and he's with the Pope in the Pope's office. And he noticed that the Pope had a big red telephone on his desk. And he asked the Pope, "What is this?" And the Pope said, "Yes, direct line to the Lord." Yeah. And the devotee said, "Can I make a call?" And the Pope said, "Wow, really expensive, long distance call. Really long. But okay, it's $100 a minute." So the devotee called the Lord. And the Lord said, "Tell the Pope, listen, you're thinking of allowing abortion. What do you think you're doing? and you eat fish on Fridays. What is this nonsense? And then the devotee paid us $100 for a 1-minute call to the Lord. Then later the Pope went to India, as he did actually some years ago. And he went to Vrindavan, and he went to visit that devotee. Yeah, he remembered the devotee. He went to visit the devotee in Vrindavan, in the Krishna Balaram temple. So he's sitting with the devotee, and he noticed the devotee also had a big red telephone on his desk. And he said, well, you got one of them too. Yeah. Could I make a call? Here's $100. Could I make a call? And the devotee said, don't worry about paying. In Vrindavan, it's a local call. Anyway, Hare Krishna. So Lord Brahma, as Prabhupada says, he had no opportunity to take the help of a spiritual master from outside because he was the only being. But the Lord enlightened him in such ways, and then the Lord did appear in front of him, actually. But otherwise, as has been described before here in this chapter, the Lord enlightened him about everything from within. Special case. So, what should we do then? We should chant. I remember, Giriraj Maharaj, when he was here many years ago, he was here regularly. If some question would come up, some, complex question about management or about anything, he would sometimes say that he would chant for a while and see what inspiration comes. So certainly the more we're practicing seriously, all sorts of things come from within. You can't stop the mind. Our program is not to stop the mind, the internal voice. But depending on the degree of purification, of purity, generally, there is more or less likelihood that what will come from within will be real as opposed to just some concoction. But otherwise, our main source of knowledge in any situation practically is the spiritual master, the devotees, the senior devotees. Like this, we generally develop our understandings and get knowledge. Hare Krishna. Any comment or question? Enlightenment, Swarup Damodar Prabhu. I didn't use that chair. I thought it was the regional secretary's chair. Any comment you'd like to make?
I really like that point that you're making about listening to, quote unquote, the inner voice and getting it confirmed. Because our minds, especially on the condition level, the neophyte level, it's so influenced and colored by our attachments, our aversions, our likes and our dislikes. It's bound to be telling us something wrong.
Right.
Very likely.
Very likely.
I remember one question Sarati Maharaj was asked many years ago in class. A question came up to him saying, Maharaj, I had a dream that my spiritual master came into my dream and said, for you don't have to go to the Dhammahatha, it's okay.
Oh.
You can sit at home. So I just wanted to check, what do you think about that? So Maharaj replied, well, if you give me the date and time that you had this dream, I'll check if I was actually in your dream, but it's probably likely I was in someone else's dream at that time. So don't listen to your dream about not going to the Dhammahatha. So sometimes I find that even for myself, our mind can make excuses and we may think it's the Lord,
Yes.
We're very prone to making excuses.
Oh, confirmation's so important.
Yeah.
One devotee, been practicing for many years, nice devotee, wrote to me a few days ago saying she had a dream of Parthasarathi Maharaj. And in the dream, Maharaj got really angry with her and told her just to get out. And so she wrote to me and asked, what to make of it. So I said, because, she's very nice, genuine type of person. I said, sounds more like the mind intervened there. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada ki.